Home prices around King County are sky high right now, but for renters, there's slightly better news. A recent survey of landlords shows the usual springtime rent hikes in Seattle are up only by 1%, the smallest increase of the decade. Here with exactly what's going on in our housing market and why is reporter Mike Rosenberg from the Seattle Times. Good to have you here. Thanks for coming in. I feel like as soon as we start talking about real estate, it's like everybody just sort of the wind goes out of you. What is driving the incredible increase in housing prices?
I think it goes back to supply and demand. I mean, there's a record few number of homes being sold right now and a record number of people looking for homes. It used to be there was about 250 homes for every person in the county. Now there's, for every person in the county there was about 250 homes. Now there's about 1,000 people for every home.
Wow.
So it's about 4 or 5 times harder than it used to be just to find a home. And there's just not that many new homes being built. We're out of room to build single-family homes. The number of condos being built just aren't up to par, and you are left with all these people wanting to buy a home and just not enough homes to buy.
And you wrote this morning so eloquently about how it is that this reinforces itself as a cycle, that we have a small inventory to begin with, which means that people are competing to get that home, driving the price up even farther than it would be if it were a normal market, right?
Right. And I think what happens is people will almost always lose their first bidding war, and it's frustrating. You get emotionally invested in a house, you fall in love with the house, and then somebody comes in and bids $100,000 more than you. And so what happens is the next time you go to bid on a house, you feel like you need to do that too just to win. And it creates this vicious cycle where people are bidding further and further beyond what a home sort of should be worth. And that just sort of reinforces itself and sort of spirals downward.
Right. You also talk about the other end of this, that there are people who are investing from overseas who may just buy a house and leave it sit. They might lease it, they might not. And tech people who are making more and more money. So you're competing against people who have more money to spend, and all of this is driving these prices. Is any of this likely to end? I mean, I look at that and I think, well, what's going to change?
Right. I mean, I think the biggest thing would be a recession that would sort of hinder some of the demand. As far as supply, I mean, we're seeing a lot of new apartments come up, which is good for rents, but as far as for sale homes, there's not a lot of new supply coming on, so there's not a lot of relief on the horizon on that front.
You also wrote about why people are waiting longer to sell their homes here. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you sell a home, it's about a 65% return on investment over what you initially paid, which for the average person means you're getting about $300,000–400,000 more than what you paid for your house, which sounds great, but then you have to turn around and buy in the same crazy market.
Right.
So unless you're downsizing or you're moving out of the area, there's not really a lot of financial incentive to buy. So a lot of people are just staying put and renovating their house. And the Seattle area is the 5th longest metro area in the country right now as far as holding on to their homes for longest.
Everybody in my neighborhood would qualify right there, because there's no reason to sell it if you're going to have to spend even more than that to get the next place. So you just stay.
Right.
And that, again, contributes to our lack of inventory. So let's talk about the rental side. Just a little bit of an increase this spring. What do you think explains that?
Yeah, I mean, I think things have, on the rental side, gone from depressing to maybe a little slightly less depressing.
Not good, just a little less depressing.
Right. So as you can see in the chart there, rents have basically gone up 7, 8, 9, 10% a year ever since 2010. This last winter, that little dip in the chart, you can see we finally had rents go down just a little bit. It was about $50 a month, and then in the spring they ticked back up about $15. And I think the thing that explains that is we've had a record number of new apartments open in Seattle. Just in the last 5 or 6 years, we've had more apartments open than in the previous 50 years combined. So we had several decades of sort of underbuilding, and now developers are going the other way and building a lot. And now I think they've sort of hit that point where they can no longer continue to increase the rent so much because there's so much competition, and you're seeing more landlords do things like offer a month of free rent to get you into a long-term lease.
They're having to compete a little bit. You wrote in your article that you've been through this in the Bay Area. We're experiencing it here now. And I have to say, as a person my age, I worry about how families are ever going to get started, how young people get started, or if you're all going to be living in some tiny micro box or a pod or something later on. What do you see happening?
Yeah, I mean, the two big things I'm seeing happening are people either moving further outside of the core. So a lot of people now are moving down to Tacoma. I talked to a few realtors in Tacoma who said now every single time there's an open house, we get at least one person from Seattle coming to bid. And the other alternative is moving completely outside of the region altogether and going somewhere more affordable. You know, there's a lot of people who are still, you know, fortunate enough to get help either from their family or they have enough savings built up. I think the biggest issue is prices are rising faster than you can save up for.
Yes.
So even if you are a responsible saver and you do make good money, you're just treading water every year if you save up another $20,000. Prices have gone up more than that.
Something's got to give. We wanted to show really quickly to our audience the interactive map that's up on the Times website. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we have a map where you can click around on every neighborhood and every city in King County and see what the current rent is and then how that's changed over the last quarter or the last year, so you can kind of get a sense for which neighborhoods are the hottest and also which neighborhoods are seeing rents rise the fastest. And in a few cases, especially around downtown Seattle, rents are actually starting to go back down.
Interesting. And you're going to stay on this beat, right? We're going to hear more.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh my God, I guess it's sort of good news if you have a house, but you still want your community to do well. So even if I own a house, I want other people to be able to enjoy that same thing. And it's tough. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. That was really cheery. Thanks a bunch. All right, up next, we get a look into the world of big-time sneaker culture. We'll be back after this. Thank you.